The models look better than the spheres, but the enemies and splatters are acting a bit strange. The enemies just roll around a bit, clipping through the planet. The splatters don't always leave the cannon in a logical orientation, and the splat is visible on enemies and other splatters. Fixing the splat is the easiest. We just have to set the call mask of the splat decal to 0, and then set the bits of the layers we want. We already do this for the reticle, so we can copy these lines from the player script. And for the splat, I would also like to show it on the water. Now the splat shows up on the terrain, but not on the enemies that are rolling around. They are rolling around everywhere because the hitbox is still a sphere, so rolling is what effect the gravity has on them. To match the hitbox to the model, we can do the same as for the planet and generate the shape from the mesh. When we run this, however, the collision is ignored because the generated hitbox is a concave, and collision with two concave hitboxes is not supported, because the calculations needed are very expensive. Concave hitboxes can also be made from multiple convex ones, but for the enemy we don't really care about all the inlets, so we can use create convex shape to create a convex hitbox that surrounds the mesh. This does make it so the collisions are no longer ignored, but has a big impact on the frames. Luckily, the function has a flag for it to simplify the hitbox, so it uses less vertices and thus has less impact on performance. And after loading for quite a bit, once again the game is smooth. The game loads so long because the simplifying calculation is performed for every enemy that is spawned, but the result is always the same. So let's save the resulting shape as a resource so we can load it in instead of calculating it again and again. We can use the ResourceSaver.save with the shape and file path and just put a breakpoint here so we can stop the game after the first time the shape has been saved. Now we can comment this out with Ctrl K and call preload for and with the shape instead. The load time is now almost instant again, and we're back to our rolling enemies. But with the updated hitbox, they no longer clip through the planet. They're also not really rolling anymore, but fall over as soon as they land. Partly because they spawn with their feet towards negative Y instead of towards the planet. So let's use the same way we orient the splat with our general align with Y, but instead of the global transform, because it's a child of planet and we want it around the planet, we can use the transform, and this is possible before adding the enemy as a child. Now the enemy's feet all point towards the planet, and most of them stay up. A few of them fall over, because they land on skewed terrain and are a bit big in comparison to the planet, so their center of gravity is outside of their base of support. We can fix this by moving the center of gravity towards their feet and scaling their size a bit down, so they're more stable. The center of gravity is standard at the origin of the mesh. To change it in code, we need to set the center of gravity mode to custom, and then we can edit the center of gravity property. To change the scale of the mesh, we can simply set the scale of the body with an X, Y, and Z value. And of course we should also set the scale of the collision shape to match the visible model. Then when running this, the enemies are still falling over. This happens because the center of mass is kinda ignored when we apply our gravity in the integrate forces function. We need to use apply central force, because this applies a force at the center of mass, which, like it says here, is equal to using the apply force function at the center of mass, but the standard position is 0, and that is the center of mass we just moved away from. And now finally, all enemies stay upright. To make the splatter have their feet oriented towards the planet too, we can reuse the general align with Y function again, and in the splatter script we need to use global translate instead of translate to make sure it moves correctly. And now all the enemies stay upright and the splatters fall feet first towards the planet.